It's our pleasure to welcome now Senator Daniel Sparks. He represents Mississippi's District 5, which incorporates Itawamba, Prentiss, and Tishomingo counties. Senator Sparks, good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Gerard. Always good to be with you. Appreciate the invitation.
Congrats are in order to get things kicked off. You are a new father.
I am. We are very, very thankful to have Hudson home. And I will say this, I cannot say enough for the folks at UMMC and Children's. We spent about 7 days in the NICU, and I would say to the Manning, Sanderson, Van Devener, the Loggers Association, the Benson family, all the people that you see when you go into that facility, thank you. We toured 2 years ago, and I thought, what an amazing facility for people who are struggling with a newborn and all the issues, never dreaming that I would utilize that facility, but they were excellent. So
I too have had the privilege of touring it, and Dr. Keaton gave me a tour several years ago, and of course he knows every inch of that place, and I was blown away. Forever changed my life, honestly. Just the image of that just large room, as you know, filled with sick babies.
That's right.
And an army of doctors and nurses running around with smiles on their face and a spring in their step, taking care of these sick babies. World-class care.
110%. And not only are they taking care of those sick babies, they're taking care of the sick-hearted mamas and daddies.
Totally.
And one day I was walking back in. The doctor had already been by and given their report. And the nurse is usually updating the attending physician, on the details. And I went through that for, about 8 days. And as I walked by, she started and said, "This is day 83, doctor." And I walked down. I told my wife, I said, "We're blessed." I mean, and I had some of the nurses tell me some children celebrate their first birthday in the NICU. They've never left. So the work that UMMC has done in healthcare across our state, but the work that they've done with the children's facility, and I think the same thing they're attempting to do with the cancer, getting the national designation with cancer, is that when we can have the treatment for our Mississippians here locally, it is a blessing. We have tremendous facilities at St. Jude. I mean, that is world renowned, and fortunately close to our doorstep, and even with Le Bonheur. And that's one of the things that we've got to work out with Medicaid reimbursement, because they're seeing Mississippi children. I realize that's across the state line, but there's some issues there, and I think Senator Blackwell the last few years has tried to remedy that, and we need to take care of the people that are taking care of our children. So I'm a big thank you to them, and we're excited.
Good that you talked about that. I didn't realize that. So everything sounds good now. You're home?
Yes, we are, and I got to feed this morning at 3:45. that lasted till about 4:15.
Did your daddy duty?
Yeah, 2 diaper changes, and back to sleep I went. So it's great.
All right. So you were telling us before we came online that your area, Belmont specifically, was spared somewhat.
We were right at the freeze line in South Tishomingo County, so the Belmont Golden area was pretty good shape. North of us, from Tishomingo, even Dennis on up, tremendous damage. The power cooperatives, and whether it's the TVA people, local emergency management, our supervisors, aldermen, the public works teams, they have been going for days, and they have gotten a lot of things put back together, but there's a tremendous amount of damage to the system. As you well know, we've had a lot of pine tree blight, so they're weak to start with, and then you put ice on top of them, and they've just taken power lines down,
no doubt.
Major utility lines. But TVA had kind of tried to keep me updated, and I've tried to communicate with local officials, but also not get in their way because they're busy, but they're doing good work, and hopefully we're close to getting past this. I do remember the 94 storm. Now, a big difference between this storm and the 94 storm is that we are more accustomed to looking at our cell phones and our digital media.
Totally true.
And so that's gone, or we rely on so much technology to run our households.
Yeah, that's right.
We don't have as many wood-burning stoves and heating elements and things like that. So I appreciate all the folks that are out there doing the work, and law enforcement, DOT, across the board. They, in the National Guard, I appreciate the governor responding and taking care of that. But we got a lot of work to do, and I'm thankful for the patience people are showing and the appreciation that they're showing.
So in your neck of the woods, Tippah County, not you don't represent it, but man, they're really struggling.
Just outside our district, Alcorn and Tippah lay next to us. Representative Steverson, I've talked with him, Senator Parks, and they're doing all they can. And I think Representative Steverson's probably been in driveways cutting trees out for people and trying to make it happen. But they really got hit hard. Normally the weather patterns as they come through, and I remember as a kid being in school, there'd be a snow day and we wouldn't get the snow. That weather pattern normally runs northeasterly, and DeSoto County would get hit and come across Marshall, Lafayette, Alcorn, Tippah, and northern Tishomingo. We would miss the snow a lot of times. So in this case, we did miss the ice. But yes, those counties have really taken a major hit. And then you look at the trees that are gone, and whether it's in the Grove or whether it's in downtown Iuka, there's some 100-plus-year-old trees that take a beating, and it's sad, but they're going to continue to plug along, and our people are resilient, and I'm quite certain our friends that are in the hunting community and what some folks would call a redneck have probably come into great resource to help their neighbors, because they will put the four-wheel drive in gear and go out and try to help their neighbors. That's one of the great things about that Northeast Mississippi corner.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and the Cajun Navy has been on hand as well to help out. I know they've been in Oxford, and then I can't remember the name of it. The grill there on campus, Rebel, can't remember the name of it, but nonetheless, the staff, they said stayed overnight to cook for the folks, right?
And we've had several restaurants in the area and convenience stores cooking and saying, hey, look, we want to feed you, and maybe they can't even charge you because the systems are down, to run a tab. But that's what people are supposed to do. People are supposed to take care of one another. A lot of our churches, civic organizations have stepped up, and we're appreciative for all that. You just have the chance to show your Christianity. You
totally agree.
The chance to show being the hands and feet of Jesus in times like this.
So Mississippians are generous for sure, and they want to help. Problem is the weather hinders them from really being active.
It's tough. 55, as you've documented, it's been so difficult to travel, and we had cars stranded last night, and we're not accustomed to driving in these conditions. So the folks that are out helping, you want to make sure they don't need help themselves at some point down the road. So.
All right, let's turn our attention to your job down there under the dome. You guys have been gathering up. It's hard to believe. You're in week 4.
We are, and this is committee, kind of getting to the committee deadline, I believe is on Tuesday, if I remember correctly. So all those bills that get dropped, they got to get out of committee in their originating house, and so that's the focus. We had committee meetings this morning. I'll go back for committee meetings this afternoon, and that's a good opportunity for somebody to present their bill and to have it vetted. I mean, members of the committee are going to ask those questions. I always encourage our constituents to watch. On the Senate side, most all those committee meetings are broadcast. They're archived. You can go back and watch it. If you get power up and you're bored because you can't go to work, you can watch the Mississippi Legislature debate bills. But I think it's good discussions. And sometimes the discussions we have doesn't mean someone is against the concept or against the idea. But fortunately, people will put their experience at work to try to think of what's the unintended consequences, and you get better legislation. And then when it comes to the floor, maybe we've got the final product, so we don't have that on the floor as much.
Yeah, so let's turn our attention to perhaps the most controversial of all, and that's the school choice issue that you're well aware. The House passed legislation by the slimmest of margins and sent it down to the Senate, where I don't think there's been a whole lot of action on it to this point. Senator DeBar, who heads the Education Committee, of course, the Senate passed its own version and had some other public education-related legislation as well. Where do you see all this going at this point?
Well, of course, the bill that came down from the House obviously has a much later deadline because, they've cleared their deadline of getting it out of committee and getting it off the floor. So it's, it probably will not take focus until we finished our committee deadlines. But the good thing, and I think you point out, is that while they've chosen to do an omnibus-style bill, the Senate has rolled out several individual bills that are components of HB 2. And I know guys on the House side have worked really hard. They're trying to do what they believe is right. It was a very difficult vote on their end, as you said. It was the slimmest of margins. So, clearly, when you put everything in one package, it brings some headwinds. But the portability piece that passed out of the Senate is something that was key last year that was discussed. Financial literacy is actually my bill that they were brought through education. I think is of the utmost importance is that we are teaching people the ROI and the determination of whether to go to college, whether to go to a CTE program, and not wait till you get to a college course. Now, Senator Boyd's going to have a financial literacy for college, and I think you should have that as well. But at the K-12 level, especially in today's cybersecurity environment, that was one of the pieces we want taught is, everybody's doing this portal-driven or online-driven, is to teach them to be safe and secure. But we
Hang on, we
see
keep
pieces.
talking.
Okay.
Senator Daniel Sparks in the Element Wealth studio. We're visiting with Mississippi State Senator Daniel Sparks from Itawamba, Prentiss, and Tishomingo counties. All right, so you've been in session for a month. We were talking about kind of the distinctions between this approach to school choice, as it is called. You got a sweeping 400-plus page House bill. You got some individual bills. One of those is public school portability. So I wanted to ask you about that because Rhino and I both reviewed that legislation. It's not a long bill. This is from Senator DeBar. But it started out as really allowing virtually any student in a public school to transfer to another public school without the ability of their home school to veto that transfer. Right now, as you know, under state law, you got to get permission from both. They would still have to get approval for enrollment from the receiving school, but the home school couldn't block it, couldn't stand in the way. But what we saw was an amendment that looks like that's now been restricted to 3 categories: students of administrators, certified administrators, what the language in the bill says, or teachers. Those students, children of those individuals, guardians or parents, could go to their school where they work. Students of military personnel, children, and then those that live more than 30 miles away from a school. So it's not really universal open enrollment, if you will. It's more restrictive in nature. I'm not sure what precipitated that floor amendment.
And I don't know as far as the actual reasoning behind that. I do know that, from the standpoint of a teacher administrator, I've had issues even within my own district where a parent would be teaching at a particular school, but they live in a different school zone. And so I get the concept of that in the military.
Yeah, but I thought we already had that.
Well, not apparently, because I've had it in my district to where somebody couldn't go. But the portability piece and I think the veto power, all of that in concept works. The one thing, and I expressed, when we were having discussions about the bill amongst my colleagues, is that one of the things that often gets glossed over in a lot of policy is rural areas versus more urban areas.
Sure.
And I have a number of schools in my district they're very small, and that's a local decision. That's a decision. We consolidated in 1991 in Tishomingo County and went from 4 to 2 schools, and so I lived through that as a junior, rising senior in high school. And of course, Belmont kept their school, and they built a new school at Tishomingo County, and the portability, in the 8th grade, you make a decision whether you want to go to Tisch County or whether you want to go to Belmont, and you can do that, already.
Okay. So they have an agreement for that?
Yes.
Doesn't matter where you live.
That's correct.
Just have to live in the county, I assume.
You do. And so, but once you make that decision, then it goes to eligibility. Because when you talk about these small rural communities, I met Tim Tebow the other day, and I actually, had this question to pass along to him. He was an exceptional star. I mean, he was beyond a star. And yet, in our rural communities, we have so many people that excel, whether it's academically, athletically, and they're part of that community. Mom and dad were part of that community. Their parents may have played ball there, and that is what those communities wrap themselves around in these small schools. And that hurts. You may say, hey, that's still best for the student if they want to transfer to another school, but it does have massive impact on that community is that child whose maybe mom, dad, and grandparents went to that school, maybe they were athletes, because that's what I think some of the biggest blowback is with NIL in the college level. And we have bills this time to put NIL at high school level. We're dealing with difficult subject matter that is going to happen. Because I can tell you, particularly in girls softball, in about the 7th or 8th grade, some of those girls that pitch are excellent.
Yeah,
and
right.
I've seen it. I've seen it happen where people are trying to get people to transfer. So, the High School Activities Association governs a lot of that, and they're going to need to be aggressive in that regard, and I hope better than the NCAA because, they've just made a mess of college athletics.
So Senator DeBarr said that no way, no how would he support, and this has been his position, this is nothing new, the creation of these Magnolia student accounts that would allow a student in a public school to receive to have the state funding associated with the student to follow them to their school of choice. He said that he's not in support of that. It doesn't sound to me like HB2's got much of a chance as written in the Senate.
Well, when you send an omnibus bill, it could be amended and sent back. It could be voted down. One of the things I would say about HB2 is if there's a clean fiscal note, I would like to see it because it is a true cost. If you're talking about the $6,800 or so per student that would go with a student, then there's a cost to that. You could be looking at $300 to $400 million at full implementation.
If the student's currently not in a public school, you're absolutely correct.
And
if it's a public to public, it's a wash.
That's correct. And so that's a concern. They threw a PERS piece in there, and you've got people that are going to do exactly what they did in '99 and just gift a benefit and not tell us what it cost and pass it to the next generation. So while there's some well-intended, I think, good pieces of that bill, and again, I would dare say, and I've not sat down and run the numbers, but I would say there's a strong percentage of things that are in HB2 that are in individual bills or may come in individual bills from the Senate. So, the House has already supported those things, so I assume they would support it in the individual bill. But I've learned over the years, I like to send clean bills. I like to send single subject bills. We complain that D.C. does all of this omnibus business, and because it boxes in legislators. And I know that's a political tool, but you ought to be able to vote straight up and down on things. And we've sent a funding bill down that has $1 billion for PERS and over a 10-year period, and that's a clean bill, and that bill's been gone for 2.5 weeks now. There's nothing to do but pass that and send that to the governor and let us go ahead and have the actuaries factor that in. We did a Tier 5 COLA pre-funding, doing the exact opposite of what they did in '99, putting money away today for an expense tomorrow. There'd been some misinterpretation of Tier 5 that there was no COLA. There's no guaranteed COLA, but I can assure you, if this legislature funds one, and a future legislature can spend the money we put aside, they're going to do it because it's politically advantageous to them, and it's not going to cut into their budget. So
it's not guaranteed; it's discretionary, right?
Well, that's the way it's written. It's an ad hoc. The board would recommend, and the legislature would adopt a COLA annually. And by the way, Alabama does this and has done it for the last not hardly a decade, but they do it based on CPIU and all these different factors. I told the committee the other day, CPIU from 2000 to 2020 was 1.6%. So inflation was about 1.6%, and our COLA was 3%. So while that's a very nice benefit to our employees, and they bargained for it, so we owe it, it was different than what they did pre-'99, which is the board actually had to vote on a COLA.
Yeah, it's really not, I don't think, accurate to call it a cost of living adjustment. It's really just an adjustment.
It is a 3%.
A guaranteed adjustment.
Compounded increase in your benefit. That's fair.
Yeah. Over 65 is compounded. If you're retired before then, it's on an annual basis. But at the end of the day, it's guaranteed, and it's really not tied to the CPI or the cost of living. It's not a cost of living adjustment. It really wasn't designed that way.
And it was a mistake. I mean, we were 90-something% funded in '99, and that legislature, it was an election year, by the way. That was the Ronnie Musgrove election year and for governor. And so, we don't have social media to go back and look at in '99, but I can assure you they went home and ran on the concept that we did something for our state employees. But what they also don't talk about is they also gave raises in the '80s that they didn't pay for. So, it's fine. We owe the money to the people in the system, and it's always been my belief morally and legally that we have an obligation to pay it. And we've taken the hard things to give reform, number one. Number two, we got to fund it. and we've done that. That bill is sitting down at the House. We also, raised the employer rate. It's going to be $186 million a year. The legislature, from 2024 to 2026, will have, if we implement the $1 billion of funding, we will have put $3 billion toward the PERS liability. Not to mention, we've been more involved with the PERS board. We've worked hand in hand with the PERS board to be fair about the actuarial assessments. We had a good discussion in Senator Harkin's committee last week. The actuaries in 2017 chose a 30-year payoff to 100%. And that's the number they keep running out and telling our constituents. And I try to remind people, when you say fund PERS, we are funding it, and we are stabilizing it, and we are going to make it solvent. But if you stick to something they did in 2017 and use a 2047 payoff target, when the actuaries and the board changed the rules,
right,
cutting the rate of return by 0.75 of a point, that's a $6 billion hit. Then that's not really fair. But we are doing our best to take care of people, and we're listening to our state employees and trying to figure out how we can plus it up and make it better. But what does it cost? Who's going to pay for it?
We should point out that you authored the bill that would transfer the $1 billion. It's $500 million sort of down payment immediately being transferred from the capital expense fund, which is really kind of a savings account. It's got $1.5 billion in it, and then the other $500 million, $50 million a year over 10 years for a total of $1 billion. I just want to get that out there.
Well, thank you.
I want you to stay around if you can.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I want to talk to you about your sort of outlook on our budget.
Sure.
We're coming right back with Senator Daniel Sparks in the Element Wealth. So we're visiting with State Senator Daniel Sparks. Okay, so you and I and I kind of put myself in that category. Maybe I'm being a little unfair in that respect. But down there under the dome, there are a handful of people that really like to dig into the numbers. You're one of them. Senator Harkins is one of them. The Speaker's pretty good. Representative Lamar, who heads Ways and Means, he's good as well. Senator Hobson, of course, with appropriations. And I'm not trying to leave anybody out here. But you guys deal with this more than the others because that's your committees. And that's kind of your interface and your function in those chambers. So the income tax, which we're eliminating based on legislation over a period of time that was passed last year, which I support elimination of the income tax. I think that there are more efficient ways, shall we say, fair ways of raising revenue for the state. But I do have concerns about the fact that, unfortunately, with the error made with the decimal points, it's become infamous now, that we are running into a situation in the future where we maybe not will be in the appropriate financial condition to proceed with cuts once the triggers era term of the legislation kicks in, and that's in 2031, I believe, is when it would first be applied. That if, in fact, we met those triggers because of the decimal point error, we may be doing so without really having the state on sound financial footing to proceed with more tax cuts.
And I understand that that's a concern. And to be very fair, there's a difference between recurring revenues and recurring expenses. And as we were talking going out of the last break, the $1 billion to PERS, the lion's share of that is coming out of CapEx. We have $1.5 billion. Right now, we have.
And I just want to point out, that's cash in the bank.
That's right.
It's a savings account that's sitting there right now.
That's right. We're spending, money that we have. We're not promising, a lot of future revenue in that sense. But also, we're about $300 million or so up, I think, on the year. Not hardly $300 million. We budgeted about $200 million to $300 million less than expected revenues. We're 130 to 160 up. So, my hope is this year, if we hold strong through the end of the fiscal year, the money that we send to PERS will literally be back in our account. So that's good. But you're 100% correct in saying that looking at future recurring, expenses and recurring revenues, because when you do a teacher pay raise, that's recurring. When you do other things, that's recurring. I must like numbers because they actually added me to appropriations this year, so I'm on both finance and appropriations.
Oh, man.
So I get to hear it, and it really does help if you want to dig in and listen to folks. We have a great legislative budget office team that stay on top of it.
LBO.
But we're in a position where you're going to reduce the income tax revenue. There's no question about it. It's a policy I support. I do think that there's some misunderstandings, and last year I would say this, when they passed the bill with the supposed, quote, error, if the error is an error, then it's an error all the way through the bill. So I think at some point people are going to read the bill closely instead of just roll it, and they'll agree probably with what Senator Harkins and I both tried to say offline, is that if you're going to read it as an error, you have to read it consistent. So you may get cuts, but you may not get the cuts you think you're going to get. But the other thing that Senator Harkins did, everybody forgets about the first part of the trigger. The first part of the trigger requires a full rainy-day fund.
Yeah, have some money in the bank.
You've got to have the full rainy-day fund. Senator Hobson wants to raise that amount this year. We're one of the lowest percentage rainy-day funds in the country. So you'll have to have the combination of a governor in the future who refuses to reach into the rainy-day fund if we've had a terrible year like we've seen in years past, to institute that tax cut. So I'm not as concerned because I believe people will operate in a reasonable fashion. And if the rainy day fund's not full, you don't go to the decimal calculation.
Right.
So I do feel confident with that. We do have economic growth. You well understand that all economic growth does not equate to revenue for the general fund. And while we continue to have that growth, and it's wonderful, we do need to pay attention to that. But the other thing is we don't ever cut spending. If you look at the bills that are out there, even the Senate's $2,000 pay raise for K-12, community college, and IHL and teacher assistants, it literally is $160 million, and that will be every year. Medicaid is going to come in probably with a $350 to $400 million ask. And every agency that comes in, they say it's a modest increase. Well, when you add all those modest increases up, it's a big increase.
There goes the surplus there.
That's exactly right. So we're on top of that. And then the counties and cities, they want ERBR to be funded. The governor wants site development grants to be funded, and they've proven to be well worth their time.
Doubt.
But with the gas tax adjustment, MDOT will have more money for maintenance. We've paid that out of general fund revenue, so there's a little offset there that's still not as much as they probably need, but those are good things. But yeah, math is undefeated, and you have to stay on top of it. But one of the things, and legislation I've dropped this year that I hope helps deal with some of this stuff, is you need to look at where we're wasting money in government. I've got a bill that will address pass-through NGO spending. We see the issue that we have with TANF. We see the issues that we're having in Minnesota. The auditor has spoken about this greatly. We have people who are gaming the system in the state and at the federal level, and legislators have got to dig in enough to be as smart as the people who are gaming the laws that we put together. And so I think that's an important piece. Also going to have a bill that extends the statute of limitations for program fraud from 5 to 10 years. I want people prosecuted that are stealing tax dollars, and that's important.
So I totally agree with you. My more radical position on this is let's just end all these grant programs. We don't seem to be able to administer them in a way that avoids and prevents all the waste, fraud, and abuse. But if we're not going to do that, I'll make a recommendation right here on the air. We don't need more laws. We don't even need more enforcement of the law. I think we're pretty good about that. What we need is to prevent. We're good at finding it out after the fact. We need to turn the auditor into the Maytag repairman, literally.
Yeah, I would like to, sure.
It's technology. I've talked about it on the show. Only through using and applying novel technology, I don't care if it's video surveillance, which we should have in every single position across the state where the public interacts with a public sector entity, such as a county or a municipality or even a state agency or DPS, and there's money changing hands. We should have that under constant AI-powered video surveillance, just like a bank does.
Well, and I will say this, Senator Boyd brought her bill again this year, and we passed it out to have all of these boards, commissions, local units of government.
Saw that.
To have that broadcast. It needs to be, especially when you're talking about taxpayer dollars and impact. Those things are there, and I agree with you. Technology should help us, and I think it has helped the state auditor's office to be able to track things down that physically we used to have to catch with our eyes. But I think if you make the process, and I don't want to say more onerous, because people out there that are grant recipients will go, "Oh my goodness, you're going to make it harder."
Yeah.
But if I make it transparent,
yeah,
the thief operates in the dark of night most effectively.
Sure.
Sunlight's the best disinfectant. So if the process is such that you're having to report and that is checkable and technology is improving, then we can do that because the people that are trying to do it right, I hate to add a burden to them, but they're the very reason the people that are not doing it right are the reason we have to do that. And we're not good about ending programs.
No.
We start a program, if it's my program, and that's one of the reasons.
Sacred cow.
That's right, 10-year statute of limitations, because if I'm the chief executive and I create a program, I'm not going to self-check myself.
Right.
I thought it was a great idea. I need to allow enough time that the next chief executive can come in, and it's what we're seeing at the federal level right now, that they can come in and go, my goodness, why are we doing this? But I do believe we have momentum today because people see the fraud that has been perpetrated with intentionality. We're not talking about people that tried their best and messed up.
That's right.
We're talking about, in this case, honestly, a group of people who have come into this country as refugees. And you go back to what Senator Ted Kennedy did in the 60s with immigration, changing the rules, and what we've done across the board. I can't get to the end of the line and just say, oh, they're doing that to get votes. But I can tell you this. They've created an environment where people will come in and say, these Americans are soft, we can scam them,
100%.
We're going to send the money back home, and then, whatever it is as far as what happened with Representative Omar yesterday. If that's a farce, I think she should be charged. But one of the things, if it's true, the guy that, came up and did what he did should be charged. But one of the things I'll say that the president has said repeatedly about her wealth, where she was negative in the hole when she got elected to Congress, now she's a multimillionaire. She has deflected and deflected, but you know what she's never done? She has never denied that she became a multimillionaire on a $174,000 salary. And we have people across the state that have that same issue.
In fact, her official filings with the clerk of the House reflect that sharp increase in her wealth. So she's not trying to deny her, but it's just, okay, where'd that come from?
Apparently, we need to put her in charge of the budget office.
Exactly. Senator Daniel Sparks has been our guest in the Element Wealth studio. We're coming right back. Stay with us. We got one segment left. Appreciate it, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Yep, we're coming right back.